the MCU has a Captain America problem. I explained part 1 with Isaiah Bradley. Part 2, we're going to focus on Sam Wilson. That's very bad dialogue, frankly, and they try to spark a political debate with the writing, but the dialogue just doesn't measure up to that. And the other problem is, quite frankly, he has a power imbalance problem, or a power balance problem, I should say, because he doesn't have the super soldier serum in Brave New World. They make him have a vibranium suit with vibranium wings that's capable of performing a sonic boom before he even hits the ground and doesn't feel the effects of it due to the suit. Now, comic book logic allows that to happen, but I just find it dumb and stupid. And also, with the amount of vibranium he has the Falcon redesigned wings with vibranium enhancement, basically. It's kind of like, how are you not basically indestructible? And it's like, well, I need the super soldier serum to go against people like Hulk and things, and I can't do what Steve did. If you had the super soldier serum plus that, you would be basically God Super Saiyan level, and no one would be able to beat you. And you're also kind of God Super Saiyan level now, because you have a vibranium suit with vibranium weaponry, and basically weaponry that can pierce anything, with a suit that's coated, and you can't die at all. And you have sonic boom technology, Falcon-like technology, so you basically got vibranium enhanced Captain America, and there's just no stakes with him putting his life on the line. The point of Steve Rogers just basically wearing his old-fashioned suit, even though like, the Stars and Stripes a little old-fashioned. The way things are going, people might just need a little old-fashioned. And, in Avengers, and the fact that his catchphrase was, "I can do this all day," was because, powers be damned, he was going to fight all day because he was still that kid from Brooklyn. And that kind of heart, that kind of stake is just not there with Sam Wilson's Captain America. And also, they've kind of cannibalized his previous positive traits as Falcon. Let me explain what I mean by that. What I mean is, he was a veterans counselor, or at least trained in listening skills to help aid veterans from the trauma of readjusting to civilian life, if not a counselor. And he used those listening skills really well, and they had the potential with the Flag Smashers to show that as well, show his mediation skills, show him dealing with them in trauma. And they tried to, but it resulted in him basically saying the word terrorist is not a very helpful word, and basically telling the senator he knows nothing about the political machinations or ramifications of the time due to the humanitarian crisis caused by the blip and then the snap. The Avengers, rightly or wrongly, they saved everyone, but they did throw them into this crisis by effect, and they didn't consider the complicated and diverse nature of that while doing so. And now the MCU was wrestling with that in Sam's tenure, but it can't wrestle with it in any kind of intriguing way. And he doesn't use his therapeutic listening skills, so to speak, in a way that is actually interesting. He doesn't explain to the senator, look, I'm on your side, but we've got to change the use of language if negotiation's going to be possible. He attacks the senator, verbally, and basically says, I know nothing about this. And when he talks about why have you got so much in reserve, okay, Sam, let's do a bit of a questioning thought here. They've got reserves of food and reserves of emergency supplies because if the situation gets even worse than the current humanitarian crisis, then the modifier of the supplies can be managed. Why are people homeless? Why is there a crisis? Well, because the population basically doubled after the world got used to its resources being basically less scarce, and now it's scarce overnight. What do we do? Okay, cool. Well, what we should do is we should allocate houses more appropriately. Okay, you had the floor of the senator, and instead of asking, can I see your plans, can I aid your plans, you yelled at the senator. But let's play a, for instance, hypothetical here. Sam gets put in charge of the plans, and gets told you can decide which families move back into their old homes, which families are reallocated new homes, and which families are pushed further down the waiting list. You as Captain America now have that power. I'm listening. Even if the senator was to do that, what would Sam do? Well, people with children should go in in these houses first. Okay. Other modifier, people with disabilities need adapted housing, so they should be above certain able-bodied people. Other modifier, family heirlooms are stored in that house that are still there, that are now being kept and sold by the other people. Whose stuff is that? Other modifier, like, do you know what I mean? There's a lot of stuff to think about, and they have to keep resources in reserve and think cold and logically, because with such a humanitarian crisis on an unimaginable scale to our world, what more could they do? And who's to say they aren't already thinking about these modifiers and having these ethical debates, but they're taking longer, and adding Sam's perspective to it would not just mean that overnight he could make the call and authorise that food parcel. Even if he authorised the food parcel and the reallocation of homes overnight, the logistics of which would still take time, and there would still be people on a waiting list that would be homeless. How does he justify that with his moral ethics? We don't know, because the story didn't actually expand upon that. It just said that Sam doesn't know anything about politics, and that's a good thing. Yes, politics can get in the way of progress, but in a humanitarian crisis where managing the idiosyncrasies and intricate tasks of a humanitarian crisis requires countries talk to each other, then politics is unfortunately the bag we've got to live with, Sam, and you are not helping. He doesn't use his therapeutic skills to make the Senate better, he just tells him that he's got to do better. How? You have the floor, tell them the plan. If you have the floor and you have a plan, speak it now. You didn't. What a waste of time. He doesn't use his therapeutic skills to help the supercharged villains, as in the Flag Smashers, stand down. No, he just basically defends them, tries to talk them down, but is seen as inexpert when talking down most of them, and if not all of them. And then does the one clever thing I think he does is he allows Carly to wear herself out when fighting him, but that doesn't make sense because her powers should mean that she doesn't wear herself down that easily, and then obviously she gets shot. And then he carries her as if this is a really sad tragedy. It's like, it's a supercharged, superpowered enemy of the state. The state is cheering right now, rightly or wrongly, no matter what your moral ethics. They don't care that she's dead. They're just thankful they don't have another crisis to deal with. And Sam's entire political stance was written by children. Like, this could be good. He could do better. And he does at least, I suppose, use his therapeutic skills to some effect when he leads Ross to the cherry blossoms, which is just a CGI background that looks terrible, and then calms him down, makes him think of Betty. That's the one time he basically got able to use his character development in a helpful way. And I gotta be honest, they should have just elevated Velkin or shown him talking to veterans, and then from the veterans he hears about this, and then he tries to talk down some veterans from joining the Flag Smashers out of disdain, perhaps. There are other ways you could have used his skills, used his skill set in a way that's been shown off as positive before, without elevating it to basically taking on the top brass of politics, and making it incredibly over-political, when frankly the only political comparison that can be made to our real world is a very reductionist and simplistic one, because this world is now fundamentally different than our Earth. Politics will have changed and shifted to more extremes on all sides as a result of the extreme crisis we're facing. People will just want to be resolved. There'd be riots everywhere. It would be chaos, and they don't really even demonstrate any of that in a way that actually feels meaningful. When I watched both Winter Soldier and Brave New World, in my humble opinion, if you disagree with me, then feel free to disagree in the comments if you want. The problem with Sam's character, and the tail end of all of this, sorry for the long-winded explanation, but at least I've given my points and evidence. The problem with Sam's character at current, and the tail end of all of this, is he feels like an entirely different character when elevated to Captain America. If they'd elevated Falcon and written more carefully, then things could have been far better, and they could have either promoted Falcon to just a higher-up hero and not passed on the mantle of Captain America and let it die with the honour of Steve Rogers, which still would have been a, way of elevating a character and a way of honouring a fallen name and hero. Or they could have given Captain America to Bucky Barnes, and people would say, well, that would be too terminus, that wouldn't happen. Well, he's a congressman, and with his past, he should not get past the congressman's manifesto checks, right? So if we're going to write politics simplistically, they may as well have given Captain America to Bucky Barnes, because it was set up before. It makes sense. and frankly, the amount of mental health, trauma, rebuilding his life, counselling, adapting after the counselling, the rise of a fallen hero, that kind of thing, that's far more interesting to show off than anything Sam's story has to offer. And before you ask, no, this is not about race, it's just about poor writing and things I think would have done a better choice, which is why I'm saying how they could have written Winter Soldier better. They could have added in and elevated Isaiah Bradley during Winter Soldier, showing off more of his past deeds using CGI or using effects to prove he's still a formidable fighter. But I talked about that in my Isaiah Bradley video, so go back and watch that if you wish. It's just called The MCU is a Captain America Problem Part 1 Isaiah Bradley. So that will be there. I might just make a playlist now that I've got 2 videos actually. Anyway, the point is, I think Sam was the wrong choice for Captain America. He hasn't been written well as a result of that choice. It could have been done better, as I've explained, but it wasn't done in an interesting way. He didn't even use his therapeutic skills very well, apart from a one-off scene in Brave New World, but the rest of that movie was just chopped and rubbish, and all the supposed working out by the leader didn't really show his intelligence anyway, so it was just a farce. Just a complete farce, and just a bad film, frankly, in my opinion. Comment below if you disagree or agree, let me know. But yeah, they've really destroyed Sam's character, and the one chalice he has for hanging around his neck, ironically, although my criticisms of him are not about race, is how they write his race in the MCU. Let me briefly explain. It's just like, they will never accept a black man as Captain America. Then they sort of do/don't, because the political brass hate him. And then it's just like, well, everyone's fine with it, which is the way it should have been before, because we are beyond the era of the 1970s. You could still show he has problems due to racial issues. They still showed that off, in my opinion, heavy-handedly and not in an intriguing or interesting character way at all. But the fact that his race is mentioned so many times throughout the 2 films, well, throughout the Disney Plus series where he elevated Captain America, and throughout the film where he actually is, and it's just, they call him Captain America every time they possibly can. They don't just call him Sam. They talk about initially how he's having problems with his race, and they'll never let a black man be Captain America, and that is the feeling of Isaiah Bradley and the feeling of some top brass. You know, it's implied they have resentment behind them, but then that's never followed up, and it's in fact pulled away from. And I just think, well, it was done poorly in Falcon and Winter Soldier, so I can see how you pulled away from it. But the fact that the writers seem to really want everyone to call him Captain America every possible opportunity in his next outing, just makes me feel like the writers feel uncomfortable with the race of the character they're writing being Captain America, and really feel the need to emphasize it in every piece of verbal dialogue, or verbally vomiting on the screen. Basically all the dialogue they can to prove, this guy's Captain America now, be okay with it. And whether that's because the writers are worried about racists in the audience, one, racists aren't going to watch it if they're really truly as racist as you say. They're just not going to watch it, or they'll just not take your messaging anyway, so what's the point? And 2, if it's not a race thing you're worried about, why are you writing dialogue so clunkily? And that's a whole nother thing. So it's just very, very bizarre, and I don't like how I feel his race has become a chalice around his neck when he's more than his race, and I wish writers would write that better. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong there. What do you think? Comment below and let me know. I don't know, anyway. That's the end of the video. Give your thoughts on this if you want. Please like, comment, subscribe, share, do whatever you will. It is very much appreciated and the channel does need it. Thank you very much for sticking with this very long rant video on Sam Wilson as Captain America. There'll probably be at least 1 or 2 more parts to this, so if you like this type of video on Captain America, anything Marvel, anything DC, then consider subscribing and sticking around. But that's good night from me. You can finally go now.